Am I the asshole for refusing to forgive my parents after they believed my golden child sister when she convinced them I was stealing from them while she drained their accounts? Hey, before we move on to the video, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. It will help us create more interesting videos for you. Thanks. I never thought I'd be writing this story, but after everything that's happened in the past few months, I need to get this off my chest. I'm still processing it all, and honestly, I'm not sure I ever will completely. This is about my family, manipulation, theft, and how being the scapegoat nearly destroyed my life before ultimately saving it. Let me start from the beginning. I'm Marcus, 34 years old, and I grew up as the middle child in what everyone thought was a perfect family. My older sister Vivian was always the golden child. She was beautiful, charming, and could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. My younger brother Tyler was the baby who got away with everything. And then there was me, the one who somehow always managed to disappoint everyone no matter how hard I tried. My parents, Robert and Linda, owned a successful accounting firm that they built from nothing. They were hardworking people who saved every penny and lived modestly despite their success. By the time I was in high school, they had accumulated significant wealth, but you'd never know it from how we lived. Dad drove the same pickup truck for 15 years, and Mom clipped coupons religiously. They were planning for retirement and wanted to make sure all three of their children would be taken care of. Vivian was always the star. She was homecoming queen, got a full scholarship to a prestigious university, and seemed to glide through life effortlessly. She studied business and marketing, and everyone assumed she'd take over the family firm eventually. She had this way of making everyone fall in love with her within minutes of meeting her. Teachers, friends, parents, our relatives, they all thought she was absolutely perfect. Meanwhile, I struggled. I wasn't naturally brilliant like Vivian, and I had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. I played football in high school but wasn't good enough for varsity. I got decent grades but nothing spectacular. I went to community college first to save money, then transferred to a state school. My parents paid for my education, but there were always comments about how expensive it was, how I should be more grateful, how Vivian had managed to get a full ride. Tyler, being the youngest, could do whatever he wanted. He was artistic and sensitive, and my parents indulged his every whim. When he wanted expensive art supplies, they bought them. When he decided to drop out of college to find himself, they supported his decision and continued to pay his rent. After college, I moved back home briefly while looking for work. It was during this time that I first noticed something odd about Vivian's behavior around our parents' finances. She had moved back to town after graduation and was living in a beautiful apartment that seemed way beyond what someone her age could afford, even with her marketing job at a local company. When I asked about it, she laughed and said she was just good with money. I found a job as a junior accountant at a firm across town and moved into a modest apartment. I wasn't making much, but I was proud to be independent. I visited my parents every Sunday for dinner, a tradition that had been going on since we were kids. These dinners were usually pleasant, though I always felt like I was walking on eggshells, trying not to say or do anything that would provoke criticism. Everything started to change about 2 years ago. It began subtly. During one of our Sunday dinners, Dad mentioned that they were thinking about updating their will and estate planning. He said they wanted to make sure everything was fair and that all three children would be taken care of. The conversation was casual, but I noticed Vivian's reaction. She got very quiet and seemed tense for the rest of the evening. A few weeks later, Mom called me at work, which was unusual. She sounded stressed and asked if I had been to their house recently when they weren't home. I told her no and asked why. She said some money had gone missing from Dad's desk drawer where he kept cash for small expenses. It wasn't a huge amount, maybe $200, but it was gone. She seemed embarrassed to even bring it up and quickly changed the subject. Over the next few months, these incidents became more frequent. Small amounts of cash would disappear. Mom's jewelry went missing and then mysteriously reappeared in different places. Dad's credit card statements showed charges he didn't remember making. Each time something happened, my parents seemed more worried and confused. Then Vivian started making comments. During family dinners, she'd mention how she'd noticed I seemed stressed about money lately. She'd ask pointed questions about how I was managing my expenses, whether I was having trouble paying rent. When I said I was fine, she'd give me this look of concern and say something like, "You know, you can always talk to us if you're struggling, right, Marcus?" The comments became more frequent and more pointed. She'd mentioned to our parents that she was worried about me, that I seemed different lately, more desperate. She'd bring up times from our childhood when I had taken small things without asking, incidents I had completely forgotten about, and that seemed irrelevant to our adult lives. The turning point came during Thanksgiving dinner 2 years ago. We were all gathered around the table, and Dad mentioned that he was concerned about some irregularities in their bank statements. Nothing major, he said, just some small withdrawals and transfers that he couldn't account for. He was thinking about calling the bank to investigate. Vivian immediately jumped in with a concerned expression. Dad, I hate to say this, but I think you need to consider that this might be someone close to you. Someone who has access to your information. She glanced meaningfully at me. I mean, Marcus has been over here a lot lately, and he's been asking a lot of questions about your finances. I was stunned. What are you talking about? I haven't asked any questions about their finances. Marcus, just last week you were asking Dad about his retirement accounts, she said smoothly. And I've noticed you paying a lot of attention when they talk about money matters. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I was making conversation. Dad brought up his retirement planning, and I was showing interest. But I could see the doubt creeping into my parents' eyes. Tyler was looking uncomfortable, and Mom was studying her plate like it held the secrets of the universe. Vivian, that's not fair, I said, my voice rising. You're making it sound like I'm some kind of criminal. I'm not trying to make you sound like anything, she replied, her voice calm and reasonable. I'm just saying that these problems started around the time you began visiting more frequently, and you have been asking about their financial planning. The dinner ended awkwardly, with everyone pretending nothing had happened. But something fundamental had shifted. I could feel my parents looking at me differently, watching me when they thought I wasn't paying attention. Over the next few weeks, the atmosphere during my visits became increasingly tense. My parents seemed guarded around me, and conversations felt forced. Vivian, meanwhile, seemed to be visiting them more frequently. She'd often be there when I arrived for Sunday dinner, full of cheerful chatter about her work and her life. Then came the accusations. It started with Mom calling me and very carefully asking if I had borrowed any money from Dad's wallet when I was over for dinner the previous week. I hadn't, and I told her so, but she sounded skeptical. A few days later, Dad called and asked if I had been in their bedroom during my last visit. Again, I hadn't, but when I asked why, he just said they were missing some important papers. The phone calls became more frequent and more accusatory. Money was disappearing from their accounts. Important documents were being moved or going missing entirely. And somehow, every incident seemed to coincide with my visits. I started to realize what was happening, but it seemed so unbelievable that I couldn't quite accept it. Vivian was setting me up. But why? And how? The how became clear when I accidentally discovered that Vivian had a key to our parents' house. I saw her using it one day when I happened to drive by on my way to work. She let herself in like she owned the place, and when I mentioned it to Mom later, she seemed surprised that I thought it was unusual. Vivian has always had a key, she said. She helps us with things around the house. But I had never been given a key. None of us kids had keys growing up, and I had never been offered one as an adult. When I asked why Vivian was the only one with access, Mom got defensive. She's responsible, she said. She helps us manage things we can't handle ourselves. I started paying closer attention to the timeline of these incidents. Every time money went missing or something was moved in their house, it happened when I wasn't around but when Vivian had been there. I tried to point this out to my parents, but it only made them more suspicious of me. Marcus, you're starting to sound paranoid, Dad said during one particularly tense conversation. Vivian is trying to help us figure out what's happening. She's not the problem here. That's when I realized how masterfully Vivian had manipulated the situation. She had positioned herself as the concerned daughter trying to protect her aging parents from their troubled son. Every time something went missing, she was there to comfort them and to subtly point the finger in my direction. The final blow came 6 months later. I got a call from Dad asking me to come over immediately. When I arrived, both parents were sitting in the living room looking devastated. Tyler was there too, looking confused and uncomfortable. Marcus, Dad began, his voice shaking, we've discovered that someone has been systematically stealing from us. Thousands of dollars have been taken from our accounts over the past year. My heart stopped. What? How? Someone has been making electronic transfers from our savings account to various other accounts, Mom said, her eyes red from crying. The bank showed us the records. It's been going on for months. I felt sick. That's terrible. Have you called the police? Marcus, Dad said quietly, the transfers were made using information that only someone very close to us would have access to. Account numbers, passwords, Security questions. I looked around the room and saw the truth in their faces. They thought I had done it. You think I stole from you, I said, my voice barely a whisper. We don't want to think that, Mom said, tears streaming down her face. But who else could it be? Vivian has access to your house, I said desperately. She has a key. She's been here constantly. Vivian is the one who discovered the theft, Dad said firmly. She was helping us organize our financial documents when she noticed the discrepancies. She's the one who alerted us to what was happening. Of course she was. She had orchestrated the entire thing and then positioned herself as the hero who uncovered the crime she had committed. I didn't do this, I said, standing up. I would never steal from you. I can't believe you think I'm capable of this. Then explain how someone got access to our account information, Dad demanded. Explain how they knew our security questions and passwords. I couldn't explain it because I didn't know how Vivian had gotten that information, but I could guess. She had been gradually collecting it during her frequent visits, probably while helping them with their computer or their paperwork. I want you to leave, Dad said quietly, and I don't want you to come back until you're ready to tell us the truth. I looked at Tyler, hoping for some support, but he was staring at the floor. He had always been conflict-averse, and this situation was way beyond what he could handle. I left their house that day knowing that my relationship with my family was over. They had already decided I was guilty, and nothing I could say would change their minds. Over the next few weeks, I tried calling and texting, but my parents wouldn't respond. Tyler answered once, but said he couldn't talk to me until I made things right with our parents. Only Vivian reached out, sending me a long text message about how sorry she was that things had gotten so complicated, and how she hoped I would get the help I needed to overcome my problems. The message was perfectly crafted to sound sympathetic while reinforcing the narrative that I was guilty and mentally unstable. I realized that she had probably shown it to our parents as evidence of her compassion and my guilt. I was completely alone. The family I had tried so hard to please my entire life had cast me out based on lies and manipulation. I fell into a deep depression and barely functioned for months. I went to work, came home, and sat in my apartment wondering how everything had gone so wrong. But slowly, very slowly, I started to get angry, and that anger motivated me to start fighting back. I hired a lawyer and explained the situation. He was skeptical at first, but when I showed him the timeline of events and explained Vivian's access and behavior, he agreed that something didn't add up. We requested copies of all the bank records and financial documents related to the theft. What we discovered was even worse than I had imagined. The theft hadn't started a year ago, as my parents believed. It had been going on for nearly 4 years. Small amounts at first, then increasingly larger sums. By the time it was discovered, Vivian had stolen over $200,000 from our parents. But the most damning evidence was in the electronic records. The transfers had been made from a specific IP address, and when we traced it, it led directly to Vivian's apartment. She had been using her own computer to steal from our parents while simultaneously convincing them that I was the thief. My lawyer contacted the police, and within a week, Vivian was arrested for elder abuse and grand theft. The evidence was overwhelming. Her computer contained all the access information for our parents' accounts, along with detailed records of her transactions. When the truth came out, my parents were devastated. They had not only lost a significant portion of their retirement savings, but they had also destroyed their relationship with their innocent son based on lies. Dad called me the day after Vivian's arrest. He was crying, which I had never heard before in my entire life. "Marcus," he said, his voice broken, "I am so sorry. We were so wrong. We should have believed you. But I wasn't ready to forgive. The damage had been too severe, and the betrayal too deep. You didn't just disbelieve me," I told him. "You cast me out of the family without even giving me a chance to defend myself. You chose to believe that I was capable of stealing from you rather than considering that your precious Vivian might not be perfect." "We were manipulated," Mom said, having picked up the other phone. She was so convincing. She made it seem like she was protecting us. "She was only able to manipulate you because you were already prepared to believe the worst about me," I replied. "This didn't happen in a vacuum. This happened because I've always been the scapegoat in this family, and it was easier to blame me than to face the truth about your golden child." The conversation ended with them begging me to come home, to let them make it right. But I wasn't ready. I needed time to process everything that had happened and to figure out what I wanted my future to look like. Vivian was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution. But most of the money was gone, spent on her luxurious lifestyle and bad investments. My parents would never recover financially from what she had done to them. During this time, I made a decision that would change my life forever. I took the settlement money from a lawsuit against Vivian and used it to start my own accounting firm. I had learned a lot about financial fraud during the investigation, and I decided to specialize in helping families who had been victims of similar crimes. The business took off faster than I had ever imagined. There were apparently a lot of families dealing with financial abuse from trusted relatives, and my personal experience gave me credibility and insight that other accountants couldn't offer. Within 2 years, I was making more money than I had ever dreamed possible. I also met Sarah, a lawyer who specialized in elder abuse cases. We worked together on several cases, and eventually, our professional relationship became personal. She understood what I had been through because she saw similar cases all the time. She helped me process my anger and trauma, and slowly, I began to heal. 3 years after Vivian's arrest, I was running a successful business, engaged to an amazing woman, and living in a beautiful house across town from my parents. I had built a life that was entirely my own, free from the toxic dynamics that had defined my childhood. That's when Tyler reached out. He called me at work one afternoon, and I almost didn't answer when I saw his name on the caller ID. We hadn't spoken since the day I was accused of theft. "Marcus," he said, his voice hesitant, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to talk to you about Mom and Dad." I listened as he explained that our parents' health was failing. Dad had been diagnosed with early-stage dementia, and Mom was struggling to care for him while dealing with her own health problems. They were facing the possibility of having to sell their house and move into assisted living, but they couldn't afford it because of the money Vivian had stolen. "They're too proud to ask," Tyler said, "but they need help, and I can't do it alone. I'm barely making ends meet with my art, and I don't know anything about finances or elder care." I felt a familiar stab of anger. Even now, in their time of need, they couldn't bring themselves to ask me directly for help. They had sent Tyler to do it for them. "Have they asked about me at all?" I asked. Tyler was quiet for a moment. "They talk about you all the time, Marcus. They're full of regret about what happened, but they're ashamed of how they treated you, and they don't think they deserve your forgiveness." "They don't," I said bluntly. "They destroyed our relationship based on lies and manipulation. They chose to believe the worst about me without giving me a chance to defend myself." "I know," Tyler said quietly. "And I know I was a coward for not standing up for you. I was so overwhelmed by everything that was happening, and I took the easy way out by staying neutral. But you're my brother, and I should have had your back." It was the first time anyone in my family had acknowledged their role in what had happened to me. It didn't fix everything, but it was a start. I told Tyler I would think about it, and I hung up the phone feeling conflicted. Part of me wanted to let my parents face the consequences of their choices. They had believed I was capable of stealing from them, so let them figure out how to survive without the son they had thrown away. But another part of me remembered the people they had been before Vivian's manipulation tore our family apart. They weren't perfect parents, but they had worked hard to provide for their children, and they had loved us in their imperfect way. I talked it over with Sarah, who listened patiently as I worked through my feelings. "The question isn't whether they deserve your help," she said finally. "The question is whether helping them will make you feel better or worse about yourself in the long run." I realized she was right. This wasn't about them anymore. It was about who I wanted to be and what kind of life I wanted to live. I called Tyler back the next day and told him I would help, but with conditions. I would hire professional caregivers for our parents and help them navigate the healthcare system, but I would do it through my business. I would treat them like clients, not family. They would pay me for my services just like anyone else, and I would maintain professional boundaries. Tyler agreed, and he arranged a meeting at our parents' house. Walking into that house for the first time in 3 years was surreal. Everything looked the same, but everything felt different. Mom and Dad looked older and frilier than I remembered. Dad's dementia was subtle but noticeable, and Mom seemed exhausted and overwhelmed. They both started crying when they saw me, and Dad kept apologizing over and over. Mom begged me to forgive them and to let them back into my life. I sat down across from them and explained my terms. I would help them, but this was a business arrangement. I would charge them my standard rates for financial planning and elder care coordination. I would not be coming to family dinners or celebrating holidays with them. I was there to provide professional services, nothing more. They agreed immediately, too desperate and grateful to negotiate. Over the next year, I helped them navigate the complex world of elder care. I arranged for in-home care for Dad, found them a financial advisor to help stretch their remaining savings, and connected them with resources for seniors facing financial hardship. I was professional, efficient, and thorough. But I was also distant. I didn't engage in personal conversation beyond what was necessary for their care. I didn't ask about their feelings or share anything about my own life. I treated them exactly like I would treat any other clients who had been victims of financial abuse. It was during one of these professional visits that Mom broke down completely. "Marcus," she sobbed, "I know we don't deserve your forgiveness, but please don't shut us out completely. We're dying, and we can't bear the thought of leaving this world without making peace with you." I looked at this woman who had given birth to me, who had raised me, who had also betrayed me in the worst possible way. She looked so small and broken, nothing like the strong, judgmental woman I remembered from my childhood. "I don't know how to forgive you," I said quietly. "You didn't just believe Vivian's lies. You were eager to believe them because they confirmed what you had always thought about me. That I was the problem child, the disappointment, the one who would inevitably let you down." "That's not true," Dad said, his voice shaky. "We always loved you. You loved the idea of me," I corrected. "But you never really saw me. You saw what you expected to see, which made it easy for Vivian to convince you that I was capable of stealing from you." We sat in silence for a long moment. Then Mom spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. "What can we do to earn your forgiveness?" I thought about that question for a long time. What did I need from them? What would actually help me heal? "I need you to acknowledge what really happened," I said finally. "Not just that Vivian lied, but that you were willing to believe those lies because of how you had always seen me. I need you to take responsibility for the years of differential treatment that made her manipulation possible." Over the following months, we had many difficult conversations. My parents began to see and acknowledge patterns of behavior that had been invisible to them before. They recognized how they had consistently given Vivian the benefit of the doubt while holding me to impossible standards. They admitted that they had been so blinded by Vivian's charm and apparent success that they had ignored red flags and warning signs. It wasn't easy, and there were setbacks. Old patterns of communication die hard, and sometimes we would fall back into familiar roles. But gradually, painfully, we began to build something new. Dad's dementia progressed, and there were days when he didn't remember the theft or the estrangement. On those days, he would greet me with genuine joy and talk about how proud he was of my success. It was both heartbreaking and healing to see glimpses of the father who might have existed without the family dysfunction. Mom, meanwhile, seemed determined to make amends for lost time. She asked detailed questions about my business, my relationship with Sarah, and my plans for the future. She listened without judgment when I talked about the therapy I had needed to process everything that had happened. She even attended one of my speaking engagements, where I talked about financial abuse in families. Sarah and I got married in a small ceremony with just a few close friends. My parents weren't invited, but I sent them photos afterward. Mom called me crying, saying how beautiful Sarah looked and how sorry she was that she hadn't been there to see me get married. "Maybe next time," she said hopefully. "There won't be a next time," I replied, but not unkindly. "But maybe there will be other occasions." When Sarah and I bought our first house together, Mom asked if she could see it. I agreed, and she and Dad came over for a brief visit. Dad was having a good day, and he was genuinely impressed by what I had accomplished. Mom walked through each room carefully, taking everything in. "You've built a beautiful life," she said as they were leaving. "I'm so proud of you, and I'm so sorry we weren't part of helping you build it." 6 months later, Dad's condition deteriorated rapidly, and he was hospitalized with pneumonia. The doctors said it was unlikely he would recover. Mom called me from the hospital, and for the first time in years, she sounded like she needed me not as a professional caregiver, but as her son. I went to the hospital and sat with them. Dad was unconscious, breathing with the help of machines. Mom looked exhausted and scared. "I don't know how to do this without him," she said. "We've been married for 42 years. I stayed with her for the next 3 days, until Dad passed away peacefully in his sleep. In those final days, something shifted between us. We weren't back to being mother and son in the traditional sense, but we were something. We were two people who had hurt each other deeply but were trying to find a way forward." At Dad's funeral, I gave a eulogy that focused on his work ethic and his dedication to providing for his family. I didn't mention the estrangement or the false accusations. It wasn't the time or place, and it wasn't what he would have wanted to be remembered for. After the funeral, Extended family members who had heard bits and pieces of our family drama approached me with questions and comments. Some were supportive, others seemed to think I should just get over what had happened. I realized that most people would never fully understand the complexity of what we had been through, and that was okay. This wasn't their story to understand. Vivian was released from prison a year after Dad's death. She reached out to me through Tyler, asking if we could meet to talk. I declined. I had no interest in hearing her excuses or apologies. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. Mom moved into a senior living community near my house. We have dinner together once a month, and she calls me every week to check in. Our relationship is still complicated and sometimes strained, but it exists. She's trying to be the mother she should have been years ago, and I'm allowing her to try. Tyler and I have rebuilt our relationship more successfully. He's gotten his life together and is now a successful graphic designer. He's also in therapy, working through his own issues with family dynamics and conflict avoidance. We don't see each other often, but when we do, it feels genuine and healthy. As for me, my business continues to thrive. I've written a book about financial abuse in families, and I speak regularly at conferences and workshops. Sarah and I are expecting our first child, a daughter we've decided to name Grace. The irony isn't lost on me that the worst thing that ever happened to me also led to the best things in my life. If Vivian hadn't framed me for theft, I might have continued being the family disappointment, accepting scraps of approval and living a life that was defined by other people's expectations. Instead, I was forced to build my own life from scratch, and what I built turned out to be better than anything I could have inherited or been given. I still have anger about what happened. I probably always will. There are days when I think about the years I lost, the relationship with my father that was damaged beyond repair, the family gatherings I missed, the milestones that were marked by absence instead of celebration. But I also have gratitude. I'm grateful for the strength I discovered in myself when everything fell apart. I'm grateful for the clarity that came from being forced to examine my family relationships honestly. I'm grateful for Sarah, who loves me without conditions or expectations. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to help other families avoid or recover from similar situations. My story doesn't have a perfectly happy ending because real life doesn't work that way. But it has a true ending, one where I got to decide who I wanted to be and what kind of life I wanted to live. Vivian stole money from our parents, but more than that, she stole years of my life and damaged relationships that can never be fully repaired. The financial theft was a crime, but the emotional theft was devastation that reached much deeper. However, in the end, she also inadvertently gave me something valuable. She forced me to become independent, to build my own success, and to create relationships based on honesty rather than manipulation. She helped me see family dysfunction clearly instead of making excuses for it. I don't thank her for any of this, and I don't forgive her. But I've learned to live with what happened and to find meaning in the aftermath. Sometimes people ask me if I think our family could have survived if the truth had come out earlier, before so much damage was done. I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe we could have worked through it with therapy and time. Maybe the underlying dynamics were too toxic to sustain healthy relationships regardless. What I do know is that the family I have now, the one I chose and built, is stronger and healthier than the one I was born into. And sometimes, that has to be enough. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button.